Is day 6 of Unit 7 on factoring. Today our essential question, or our aim, is how do we factor using the difference of two perfect squares. Another way you might see this is just dots. Okay, difference of two perfect squares. So before we get started on how to factor, remember that FOILing or distributing is the opposite. So let's simplify these two examples. So if we simplify x minus 3 times x plus 3 using FOIL, we would get x squared plus 3x minus 3x minus 9. If we combine like terms, our final answer will be x squared minus 9. If we do the same thing with the second question, okay, a similar thing will happen. We'll get y squared minus 5y plus 5y minus 25, and those cancel as well. Okay, so normally we have noticed that when we factor, or sorry, rather when we FOIL two binomials, we always get a trinomial. But these are the only cases that this doesn't happen. So these expressions are called, and when I say these expressions, okay, are called the difference of two perfect squares. Difference, of course, meaning subtraction. And a perfect square has two of the same factors. Okay, two of the same factors. Okay, so let's go over our perfect squares real quick. Okay, so we would start with the number 1. Okay, so the number 1, the square root is 1 because 1 times 1 equals 1. Okay, another perfect square is 4. 2 is the square root because 2 times 2 equals 4. So we're trying to look for that number times itself to get us to that spot. Okay, so we also have 9, which the square root is 3, because 3 times 3 equals 9, and 16, which is 4, because 4 times 4 equals 16. Okay, so similarly, x squared, the square root would be x, because x times x equals x squared. And lastly, x to the 4th, actually we'll do one more after this, would be x squared, because x squared times x squared equals x to the 4th. So let's do x to the 6th, just to do one more. And this is because x cubed times x cubed equals x to the 6th. Remember that when we are multiplying, we always have to add our exponents. So what I'm hoping that you noticed is that variables with even exponents, okay, they have to be even. Okay, take half of the exponent. Okay, so for the square root of x to the 8th, this would be x to the 4th. Okay, and that is because x to the 4th times x to the 4th equals x to the 8th. Okay. For this one, x to the 9th is not a perfect square because the exponent is odd. Okay, and lastly, we have x to the 100th. Okay, again, we just do half of this. So this would equal x to the 50th. And of course, that is because x to the 50th times x to the 50th equals x to the 100th. Again, this is just to get you understanding how to take a square root of a variable with an exponent. Okay, so the difference of two squares, okay? Again, we call that dots. Okay, so when you do this, what we have to double check is this must be a perfect square. Okay? So you have to have an even exponent. Okay? This has to be a perfect square. And lastly, we must have a difference. Okay? Which is subtraction. Okay? So if you look at this expression right here, x squared plus, okay, this is not a difference of perfect square, okay, because although x squared and 9 are perfect squares, this expression is a sum. Okay, which doesn't work. It's called the difference of perfect squares, so we probably have to have a subtraction problem. Okay. All right, so what do you think the factors of x squared minus 16 are? So in your head you should be thinking, okay, we have an x squared and a 16. So what you're going to do, okay, you're going to think in your head, so x squared, the square root of x squared would be x, and the square root of 16 is 4. Now what I want you to remember is the square root of 16, okay, can actually be a positive 4 or a negative 4. Because if you think about it, 4 times 4 is 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 is also 16. So we're going to have 1 be a plus 4 and 1 be a minus 4. So those are our factors. So to generalize this, we can just tell ourselves, okay, so the square root of the first term plus the square root of the second term, and then the square root of the first term minus the square root of the second term. To check, of course, we can FOIL. Okay, so if we FOIL, we get x squared minus 4x plus 4x minus 16. Our middle terms cancel out. So x squared minus 16. So that does work. Alright, so we are going to go through all of these practice problems, and you can do them on your own. Okay, so again, you are going to always draw your set of parentheses. Okay, you're going to take the square root and the square root, so we get x and x. One is plus, one is minus, the square root of 4 is 2. Okay, simple as that. Okay, square root of a squared is a. One is positive, one is negative. Square root of 100 is 10. Okay, again, because this is subtraction, you have to keep the order. So when I say the square root of the first term, it literally has to be the first term. So for this one, the 9 will actually go in front. 1 is positive, 1 is negative, and then the second term goes behind. Notice that one looked a little bit different. Okay, next one, square root of the first term. 1's positive, 1's negative, and the square root of the second term. Okay, and just keep going using that same pattern every time. Okay. Okay, now we have an x to the 4th. Okay, remember this is just half of the exponent, so this would be x squared and x squared. 1 positive, 1 negative, 3 and 3. Okay, now we have multiple parts to this term. So take the square root of the coefficient, which is a 2, and then the square root of the variable, which is an x. Okay, so this is just 2x and 2x. And then I have a positive 3 and a minus 3. Okay, same thing for these. So 25a squared, that would become a 5a and a 5a. And then plus 4b plus 4b. Okay, difference of two perfect squares is definitely the easiest, as long as you know your perfect squares. But remember, if you don't, you're just going to hit the square root button in your calculator and you can find the answer. Now, if you, I don't have enough room for that, let me make that a little bigger. If you guys do not know your perfect squares, I highly recommend that you go over those. And I will do that at the end real quick, just so you have it written down. Okay, so this is a 12y. Alright, almost done. Okay, what do we notice right here? This is this is a not a difference, so this is not factorable. Going so fast, almost went over that one. Okay, 4x, oh, sorry, not 4, 2x. Okay, so we have a 2x and a 2x, and then plus 4, minus 4. Also, if you wanted to do minus then plus, a positive and then a negative, you can do that as well. Okay, so x to the 4th would be x squared and x squared, and then we have a plus 4 and a minus 4. Okay, so the last thing we are going to do, of course, are some word problems. Okay, so if the area of a rectangle is expressed as x to the 4th minus 9y squared, then the product of the length. So we have area equals length times width. We have x to the 4th minus 9y squared. So we need to figure out what multiplied by each other would get us this. So this is asking us to factor. Okay, so we do the first term, so we get x squared and x squared. So already we know 1 and 4 cannot be the answer. The next one I see, actually I look at this wouldn't work either. Remember, you can always FOIL to check, okay, so you could go backwards. But the biggest thing here is to know that this is asking you to factor. Okay. Because it doesn't actually tell you to factor, so make sure that you guys recognize that. Okay, so our answer is going to be 2. Alright, next one. The area of a parallelogram is expressed as 25x cubed to the 6th, minus 144z to the 16th. So again, area is equal to length times width, so this is asking you to factor. Alright, so go ahead and get your 2 sets of parentheses. Okay, so this would be 5x cubed and 5x cubed. We have a positive and a negative. 12 z to the 8th, because that would be half. That would be half. Okay, so 12z to the 8th. Alright, so let's see, that would be number... Okay, so be careful when you see these, because see how these are good. These are both negative, and these are both positive, so see that. But notice these are the ones that have the correct answer. So just be careful, because they try to trick you, giving you questions that are very, very, very similar to each other. But they are a little bit different. So just take that extra second when you're doing multiple choice, because remember I've told you that the multiple choice really is the most important part. Okay. So this is your classwork. Okay, so if you'd like to work with a partner, you can go ahead. If you do not finish it by the end of class, of course, it is homework. So hopefully now you can answer the question, how do we factor the difference of two perfect squares? Here are your steps to use. Remember, they are always going to have your two sets of parentheses. The first terms are the square root of your first term, and then the second part is the square root of your second term.